The one thing that I think about during that 3-year stretch is the importance of having that purpose-driven life.
You saw me.
Yeah.
You saw me at my worst moment in my life. And you were right there with me when I hurt my neck. And I remember being in the living room with my wife and couldn't hold my daughter. She was only a few months old at that time, about 6-7 months old. Couldn't hold her, was laying on the couch. She's crying. My wife's making dinner, and just like, I can't help at all. I can't do anything. All I can do is be in this immense pain.
You know, he ruptured his carotid artery. He detached his brachial plexus. He wants to get back on the field, and he's like, yo, I can't go. And, you know, that man had surgery on, like, say it was a Thursday. He was back at practice on Friday in a sling.
And when I did that and made the move, one of my kids came up to me, one of my swimmers, and he said something really important to me. He said, Coach, we're really proud of you because you are doing exactly what you tell us to do all the time.
Hey guys, welcome back to Tough Love with Dr. John O'Connor. Today's guest, Vito Chiaravalloti, is a good friend and has been through it, from surgeries to professional baseball to running one of the most prestigious high schools in New Jersey. And I'm so excited to have him on as a guest today. Vito, welcome to the show.
My man, great to see you again. Been a while.
So, you know, it was crazy seeing your, even just talking before the show today, that you've been off social media and everything you've been doing. As somebody that, you know, my son started at that school, you know, he's finished now, you know, he's at IMG. You've been a spiritual, physical, athletic motivator for the entire time I know you as an adult, as an athletic director, a coach, mentor, parent, now dad, you know, and husband. You know, tell me about where you're at right now and the journey that got you from, you know, CBA to here.
First off, thanks for having me on. This is fun to reconnect. And as soon as I got back on Instagram and we connected again, it was like old times. I mean, you know, for everybody who doesn't know, 2020 hit, we were working together day to day at that point and having a lot of fun, trying to build something that we were both really passionate about. And obviously COVID changed the whole world. And with that came a ton of changes for you, who's now, you know, where you're at in your life, and also for me. So I went from education to the world of healthcare, pivoted pretty big time in 2020, had an opportunity to come with Stryker, and now I sell. I'm in the OR every day. The only time I had ever stepped foot in an operating room was for my own surgeries. And I'll never forget those days in August of 2020, walking into an OR for the first time. And my boss gave me the best advice ever. He's like, just don't touch anything blue. And I made sure I kept that promise not to contaminate anything. But yeah, it's been a great journey for me, but it was just time. I was stuck in one place and I wanted to continue to grow.
Awesome. You know, one of the big things during that pre-COVID time, you know, being a couple years older than you, I was always sitting on you about that pivot. And I know that you guys are homegrown, Jersey-based family. And I think there was a job op out in California. It was a big job. And I remember that was one of the things that I've always told people about you, that he is a grounded guy. You know, he's an old soul. And I knew you were like, yeah, I can never go. You know, my wife loves being home with her family. They're so close. I mean, it's like Sunday, you know, Sunday sauce or whatever the case may be, but there was just no going. What was the point? Because you were loved there. You could have been one of those guys that hung a banner at CBA for 30, 40 years down the road. What was like, hey, it's time? What was that moment?
It's a great question. I mean, for me, the second that I had my daughter, my perspective changed. I'd always wanted to continue to advance. I'd always wanted to continue to make an impact to wherever I was. I found myself in the world of education, and that was not by design. You know, maybe by God's design, but not by my design.
Sure.
And obviously a more powerful design. And so found myself in this world of education, and I just immediately immersed myself in how can I make the biggest impact possible? And I realized that my path to Catholic education was eventually running my own school. And so, and just trying to make sure that we continue to get Catholic education to as many people as we could. And it's really tough. Catholic schools are closing. They're not opening, as you can see. So, and so at that moment I had my daughter, she was, you know, a couple months old, and I realized, well, where am I going to go? I'm at a place that I love very much, and I need to make sure that I'm continuing to advance, but where am I going to go? And there were very limited options in Jersey. So you mentioned California, there was a job, there were opportunities out in Colorado and Miami, but our family's here. We love it here. And so I just stayed put, tried to do the best I could do at the academy every single day for those kids. And then this opportunity came around. And as soon as it did, I thought to myself, something I told my kids all the time that I coached. I said, don't be afraid to grow. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to step out of your shell. And when I did that and made the move, one of my kids came up to me, one of my swimmers, and he said something really important to me. He said, Coach, we're really proud of you because you are doing exactly what you tell us to do all the time, which is challenge yourself, continue to grow. So that's for me, that was the moment. But without COVID, wouldn't happen. COVID gave me the opportunity to think, to pray, to reflect.
And move.
And that's it. And take action. How to take action.
The funny thing about it is you've been radio silent on social media for a long time. And, I'm one of those people that like, I pick up a conversation 3 years later. So you were like the Daily Stoic, the this and that, and all the different things you'd forward. And I chuckled because you were beyond just looking at them. You had that passion, understand, and really mean what it meant, like reading scripture, right? And when we were working together every day, I had a really, really, really dark time. And it took a solid, it took 3 years to get out of it. And, I think like anything else, when you go into something really dark, like, your neck surgery, you come out different, right? And some come out better, some come out jaded, but you definitely come out different, right? And when I came out of there, it was like being in a blender. And my whole life, I've always been a grinder, right? I was, coming up in the short conference. We were just talking about basketball talent back then. Coming up in the 90s, short conference pumped out a ton of Division I players, Division II players
all the time,
and there was exceptional basketball players in really all sports. And I was always a kid that had to fit in, and and I chuckled because now you'd be elite because there was these kids, as much as they think they're specialization, they're just not as many. And we talk about it, you being in the school systems, with the paid recruiting, they get moved, NIL, all these different things. But the one thing that I think about during that 3 year stretch is the importance of having that purpose driven life.
Yes.
And the one thing I thought about was, what can I do as I'm coming out of, being hurt and fitness? And I chuckle all the time. We were talking about one of those fitness videos the other day, and, we're putting a collage together right now of during that 2019, 2020, when I was down to 180 pounds, I'm 205, 210 pounds now. And, coming from a person that was paralyzed, fractured skull, rebuilt knee, I had never felt bottom like that before. And I know,
you saw me, you saw me at my worst moment in my life. And you were right there with me when I hurt my neck. And I remember being in the living room with my wife and couldn't hold my daughter. She was only a few months old at that time, about 6-7 months old. Couldn't hold her, was laying on the couch. She's crying. My wife's making dinner, and just like, I can't help at all. I can't do anything. All I can do is be in this immense pain. And I remember looking at her, and I remember being like, I understand now the level of pain that people can be in. I never ever contemplated, being depressed. I never said to myself, oh, I'm depressed. I never thought about, opioids or anything like that. I was like, I understand now how people can get into a really dark place.
Yeah.
I was in such incredible pain. And you were there. Number one, you were there for me immediately. The first person I called was you. I was in such, incredible pain.
It was amazing. We made a dent in it. We were like, oh, maybe it's going to go away.
Somehow you gave me a little bit relief.
And you nosedived. We need to get surgery.
Yeah. And, you combine that with losing my dad early, and it's like, you get one at bat. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
You get one at bat. And so you talk about purpose-driven life. I mean, I was always on social media just trying to spread positivity, and I cannot stand social media, right? So I took a break from it for 3 full years, got off of it. And that wasn't planned. That was just like, hey, I'm just kind of taking a break. I want to focus on my family and my new career. And then I realized, like, what kind of hypocrite am I? Like, I should be a part of solution. I shouldn't be dark, right? I should be a part of solution. So when I got back on, it was like purpose-driven life. It's like, let's impact as many people as we can, period.
So got it. So I'll tell you this. The funny thing about it is when I hear that, I love it because so many times people say, I read a great post today. I think Lewis House or somebody put it up, and it was the truth. It's like, age is irrelevant. If you want to start over, whether it's 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, it's about having that understanding to just move, just do it, and don't stop till you get there. And, one of the journeys, I tell my son this every day. I say, he's like, Dad, I don't know what level baseball I'm going to play. I said, Johnny, it's not about that. Like if you go down there and you grind, and I've worked with, as both of us have worked with thousands of kids, swimmers, I'd always celebrate how excited you were to celebrate those kids in the pool.
The best.
And one of the things that I would say to him is I said, probably the best story that I ever heard was one of my kids was an elite prep school. And these kids, and not only elite, prestigious. Kids were getting dropped off in helicopters, Maybachs, Bentleys, this, that. And this kid was a pretty wealthy kid for here. He's like, Doc, whole nother level. They're getting a helicopter come to bring them to wherever the jet was to go home.
Another level.
But this one kid was so special. I remember the story. And he was telling me, he goes, all these kids were athletes, and this kid was like the Rudy of them, that he wasn't athletic. He wanted to be around. And he ultimately became this massive sports agent. But the funny thing about it was he played everything and didn't care about being good, but he gave 1,000%, and they all loved him. And they're like, yo, he sucks. And the funny thing about it was, but what all the other ones would say that were really talented kind of got it. Dude, he loves it. Who cares? I'm good. And most times I'm just out here because I have this ability and I don't even care.
No, at the end of the day, talent is talent. Talent is talent. I tell people all the time, but if you give effort, you are going to always capitalize on it. Maybe not in that moment, maybe not even in that activity. How many athletes are out there that have incredible talent, but never really realize their potential?
100%.
And so
more times than not,
dude, more times than not. And that's probably the most difficult thing. Going back to my days as AD, a lot of the conversations that I had with families, they were disappointing at times because we've diminished the experience of the high school athlete. We've completely diminished it, right? Like, no longer is being all shore, first team all shore in a sport like baseball, any of the sports, but
huge
baseball.
celebration.
That used to be a huge deal. And now it's like, but he's not getting any looks at D1 or he's not getting scholarships, right? So you're now upset because he's not one of the top 3% of the kids in the country, right? But like we've diminished his career.
Be present. Be here.
Be present. Enjoy. Yeah, because it's going to pay off.
Right here. Stay right here.
Yeah. And I would tell families, it's going to pay off. It might not pay off in sports, but it shouldn't. That's not the point, right? It shouldn't.
It's funny. I sat in on an NIL event, which I'm actually going to invite you to meet this guy on Thursday if you can get out. And they had a fantastic, fantastic point. They started talking about all the stats of pro athletes to get there. And it was so minuscule and so like, holy crap, no one's getting there. You're not going, right? But so the argument was take the money now in high school, college, because your pipe dream of getting to the pros could be over like that.
One injury.
One injury,
even for the most talented.
For the most talented. Listen, when I go to get inspired, like to get ready to jump on the podcast, I always listen to the 30-minute, Break the Internet, Inky Johnson. And the best, right? And here he is talking about, he ruptured his carotid artery. He detached his brachial plexus. He wants to get back on the field. And he's like, yo, I can't go. And, that man had surgery on, like say it was a Thursday. He was back at practice on Friday in a sling. And he's pushing guys. And I said, what's funny is like that gift, you may have got to the pros and sucked. You could have had an ankle injury, knee injury. The amount of bodies and minds that you're lifting up with that you never quit. I'm blown away. And, it's like, I listen to that and I say, obviously, like my Guillain-Barré syndrome, paralyzed left my body and, I can't have antiviral medicine, but I don't know how many times I've been in my clinics over the years and I took a knee with a little kid and they're like, Dr. Connor, you're so fit for your age, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm so hurt. And I'd be like, when I was your age, I was paralyzed. And, and sometimes I get choked up saying it. I'm like, cause I've been through it over the years and I'm like, and by the grace of God, I'm still here.
Oh man.
And I can still push myself and do stuff. And maybe I can't do it like we just talked about. I may not be able to do it like 20-year-old me or 30-year-old me, but I can still give it a go.
Yeah.
I was chuckling.
But 20-year-old you and 30-year-old you didn't have the mind that you have today.
Correct.
Right?
Wisdom.
Like sometimes the mind and the body don't exactly overlap. Right?
So many injuries that I got back then, and I'm sure the same thing. I used to lecture you when you're like, I'm playing hoops today too. I'm like, maybe not today. I'm like, weren't you sitting all day like in history or whatever? I'm like, but we want to do what we want to do. And I think if you want to think you had this best life, then you got to live it, right? And like you said, you get one
crack. You get one crack at this thing. And you've talked so much about these athletes and parents, and you're one injury away. I mean, but think about all the things that we can learn as we're playing, as we're grinding through it. And that's really the goal, is let's take something out of it. And that's hopefully that's the message I can get across to anybody. Like you said, it's never too late. I mean, I was 39, when I changed careers and completely shifted.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
and that's inspiration right there. I think I say this to people all the time. Like, we have people that come in and out of our company, and, people taking jobs, and I'm like, hey, is it a better job? It's a different type of healthcare specialty. They're getting paid more.
Right.
Hey, you got to do it. As much as it's a tragedy to me in that short time, that brief moment of having to reload a staff person, but if they get a $10,000, that's life-changing. You got to take it, and, I had one, near and dear. I mean, when I was going through that dark time, I was hurt, probably the best physical therapist I had ever worked with to date. And we just recently lost her to a competitive company. But when I had time to sit with myself and reflect, that person was with me every day trying to get me better. And, whether we were going to get a foot massage to make me feel better because how miserable I was, or, her working on me in between patients, or when we first started during COVID, we would joke because I think people were so excited to be able to come to us and have socialization, right? Because it was like the world was on lockdown, that we would see 50 or 60 people, and we were only open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a very limited time. And the scrubbing and the mopping and the cleaning, and it was just her and I blown through latex gloves and masks, and and maybe one other or two other people, and maybe one front desk person. And I had to say, I was like, we lost her, and I was like, damn, that hurt. But when I had that time, I said, you know what, you're not going to have everybody forever. The time you have, you got to appreciate that and reflect on it. And if she's listen to this, I'd say, what a great time. It made me reinvest back into the practice. It made me also think about pivoting, because I said, what we started with our new modalities, you're asking that new career we went into,
yep.
And we work with a ton of science now, because what I realized, if I ever want to have a practice that companies come in and want to buy, if I'm 60, they're not buying you, they're retiring you.
Right.
But if you have a system that's getting results, it's scary that everything's going to artificial intelligence, AI or technology. But the reality is, if you're getting results and it's reproducible, and it's a system from the intake of the phone call all the way through.
Yep.
Patients are like this. Wow. And that testimonial goes up, and, Matt and my guys here, they film them all and they see it. Sometimes we cry watching the testimonials. Like, I laugh. I'm like, I didn't know I cried so much after COVID. I'm now like a walking Hallmark card.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I'm like, that really happens. We really were part of that. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, I think early on in your career, you always want to say, hey, Vito did that, or, Coach V did that.
100%.
And now I'm like, guys, don't even put my name on there. Celebrate that technology, celebrate that win, and celebrate the person that had that experience.
It's unbelievable. You're what you're talking about, because just to see the mindset, the shift, the change, and how it progresses through your life. You're so right. When you're younger, I just posted about this the other day, the stupid mistakes I made when I was a kid. And when I say a kid, I don't mean like 10. I mean like
31.
30. Stupid mistakes that you make and you continue to make. And, the one thing that I've learned in a very short time of being back is I've always worked on myself, right? But when you make it public, it changes the game.
Yeah.
It changes the game. And so for me, it's like a performance journey. Like, I've always been obsessed with performance. That's why I think you and I got along so well, right?
Yes.
It's like obsessed with performance. But that performance journey that you're on, it changes. And, you're going through it, whether it's at home, in your job, in your relationships, whatever it might be. But in your own personal journey to just find your purpose here. And so as I've been on that journey, it's amazing how I look back and I say, and I'm going to continue to make these mistakes. And you talk about pivoting. And I'm 39, but how old were you when you came out of COVID and you were thinking, I don't want to ask your age. If you're not 49. Telling people your age, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's it.
But who's to say that I won't pivot again, or, I won't feel stuck again in my life? The beauty is that I have the confidence now that I got through it. And I think that people just you say you have to move. I say you have to take action. Same thing. You have to take that first step, right?
I think so many times, I listen to myself sometimes, and I start laughing when I'm listening to podcasts, how it went and the flow and how it's improving and the progression. And one of the biggest things is, I actually was listening to Ed Milet today, and he was talking about separation season. And he goes, can you believe, and he's a stat guy, right? And I was chuckling because the post he put today was like from 2019 or during COVID, because he was talking about outdoor gyms and stuff, but he recirculated today, just the other day. But the funny thing about it is so many people listen, but don't act.
Or read, right?
They read.
Like how many books can we read? Right?
And when I started this journey, it was probably like 2015, 16. And now here we are, sprinting into 2024 of the Jocko Willings. I loved the military stuff to start, and then kind of progressed into business. And now I'm really loving hearing how to talk to people. Like, in other words, so many times people are so transparent, and they say right away, I need you for this, versus say, how you doing, man?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I'm loving, actually, Sean was telling me the other day, I was actually probably a couple months ago now, this guy Hermosi, and impressive, right? And the neat thing about it is, here's a guy that started in the gym business, college educated, the whole deal, but took something as simple as physical fitness and created a bazillion-dollar enterprise on how to fill gyms. But then when he realized it's like widgets, talking about economics being in high school, it's transferable. And then I started staring at our model. And I said, you know what, guys, our core four can be applied to anything. Because the first thing starts with, and God knows you've talked about this as an educator, is I see these kids snapping and you're sitting right across and they're snapping, versus saying, V, what's up? What's going on? Talk to me. Right. And, we're communicating, and it starts from a stranger. You make them feel welcome. You make them feel that there's compassion and caring. Then from there, somebody's following up and driving that point home. They're asking more questions about those concern points, those pain points. By the time they get to the doctor on the third step, we know so much about them when they exact that model that the patient's kind of taken back by it. They're like, so much already. And I'm like, if you've gotten to us at this point, we realize you have some type of multi-regional pain, you have this going on, but you could apply that to anything. I don't care if you're trying to grow your law practice or accounting, this and that, and you have this certain specialty you want to do, boutique, whatever you want to call it. Now, you know what they want. You know what they need. You know what their pain points are, their enjoyment points, and you can provide that if that's what in fact you do.
Right.
And, getting to the other side of it now, when we hit our first national coaching platform a few weeks ago, when I was up there, I haven't coached, like you said, I've been on social media in 3 years. COVID hit, and I had taken a couple injuries, and I was right when I think I fractured one of my vertebrae. And I was taking time off. It was going to heal. It wasn't anything. It was just it would have been back pain for about 6 months, and to the day it went away. But I had to lay off the basketball court. And as you know, as a professional basketball trainer, I loved that. That was my, I read that one book. It was like Peter Pan syndrome, where I loved being out there. I wasn't a coach. I was a trainer. And I loved getting dressed every day. And they're like, how old is that guy?
Right.
And at that time, I was actually 44, 45 years old, and I was grinding. Like, I was out there going, not missing a rep. I mean, I knew my limits. I wouldn't jump in there, but if I got in, I was as good as I needed to be.
I remember you telling me about it.
And I have to tell you, like, when I gave that up, and it's funny you talk about, like, I'm in a couple books right now, I didn't get to say goodbye to that. Injuries,
How
COVID.
important is that?
And I try to tell people, I'm like, hey, I have a story of one kid that, and I'm actually having my podcast actually in the next couple of weeks, that was probably one of the most sad moments I've had in sports. And God knows you were along there in Scholastic at a prestigious school in New Jersey. I was running training, ironically, in a Catholic church gym on a Sunday morning. And the dads were all holding court on stage, eating their bagels, drinking coffee. And this kid dropped on another kid's feet. And unknown to him, he had the sudden death syndrome. He had the viral version of it, rare, ultimately monitored by the Mayo Clinic and another international heart institute. And he had a progressive virus that was literally asphyxiating one of the chambers to his heart. And his heart was failing. And in that moment, he dropped, and I yelled to the dad, and they're not paying attention. These are guys that are dear friends to me to this day. And I yelled, jam at the top of my lungs, and he doesn't look, then he looks at, and then he realizes, and they think it's blood sugar. Maybe he had a couple beers the night before, and he turned gray. That's not beer, right? They get him to the hospital. They're like, hey, this isn't us, this and that, progresses. And this kid had a journey. Gets back to play. It took, I don't even know, maybe probably took a year for him to get clearance to allow him to be back in the sports. He comes back. What tenacity, what dignity, what motivation as a young man to go through that. And I think too, it's like one of those things that they say you don't really think you're going to die until you're like 27, 28. You feel like you're invincible. But he was at a point right before like an act of God, that virus started to reverse. They told him that we might have to start thinking about getting you on a, replacement list, and it turns, it's real life shit. Right. And, in that moment, that day I got home when that went down, I'll never forget it. We were living in Jackson at the time. I went outside and I sat by my fire pit up on the deck, and I just put my head, and I have young kids at the time, and I literally just put my head in my hands and just started crying. And I was
What year was that?
Oh goodness. Had to have been about 10. It had to have been about a decade. It had to have been about 10 years ago.
Wow.
And, now he's got a fashion brand. But the moment my story was staying in it, and you get one crack at it. His senior year, him and a coach, and they're all friends, he stopped playing and he quit. And I always say, hey, you know what? Sometimes you quit and walk away. But he didn't quit and walk away. He quit like that kid I was telling you earlier. And he was the best fan ever.
Right.
He led the Cougar Den, like, in CBA Crazies, whatever. Yeah. And I remember talking with him, and we always had, like, I have a picture of him and I when he was a baby with a little headband on, with the little wristbands on. And I'm drilling him in the auxiliary gym, and he's probably 6, right? And he goes, Doc, you've been with me a long time. I said, yes, I have. He goes, I will never stop thinking about that. I wish I was part of that team. And the only thing I could do, because I couldn't bring myself back to it, because the coach would have probably taken him back, but he's like, I can't, was be the best fan I could be. And they won a sectional that year, and they put a banner up and all that. And what's funny is I always say, it's like, there is nothing like going into a home gym, like old school CBA. Mm-hmm. And that is a 6 man. You know what I mean? And this kid days. Was literally like the Irishman, or like the Buckeye. You know what I mean? Like, right. Like going up and down the
leading
sideline.
Leading the chance.
And this day, you talk about an impressive young man. He's launched a clothing line. He's got a fitness thing. He's got this, he's got that. And I say, I would say to him right now, if he's listening, I say, John, that's winning.
100%.
Right? 100%. You make halftime decisions, and sometimes you lose. And in that situation, you maybe didn't, you didn't get one crack at it, but everything you're doing now, that should be a story you look back when you're reflecting, you're sitting in a boardroom and this becomes a major national brand or national brand. It's like, hey, once I walked away, I would never do it again. Yeah. Or if you walked away, it could have been the best decision you ever made.
Best decision you ever made.
Right?
100%.
And it depends on how you spend it, right? Half empty, half full.
Mindset.
Yeah.
Mindset. I mean, life will happen to you regardless, right? Life's going to happen to you, but it's how you interpret it. And I think a lot of that it's true for all of us, and we all go through it. I mean, our perception's the reality, but you have the ability to stop, take a breath, and try to translate what's happening to your world. And so for him in that moment, if he felt like that was what was best for him, he can look back on it with pride.
Yes.
Right? Whereas, not all of us, we don't always have that luxury where we look back and say, hey, that was a positive thing. But we have to at least try to have the mindset of, listen, I see it. It happened. How do I move past it?
It's funny. I've been reading so much spiritual work from Eckhart Tolle and these different, like these just deep healers and transcendence or whatever they refer to themselves as. But the funny thing about it is half our memories are not even accurate. And so I try to tell the kids, I'm like, I used to love being like a young kid and hear, the aunts and uncles, especially on the Irish side, talk about Irish folklore, especially if there was a scotch or a beer involved. The stories got better as the night went on.
Always.
And I would say, I'm like, reframing is everything, right? And so in that moment, don't look at it like you quit. Look at that time you felt like, hey, I left it out there.
Right.
And then, you went on. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's something said. I don't care whether it's your business life, personal life, whatever. I think that if you're going to take the shoes off, you're going to lace them up for the last time, you got to bring it. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we've always got along with, like you're like a big brother to you, because I got you by a couple of years, is I always tell people, I'm like, hey, look, like right now I'm on a big fitness, like a huge fitness push and supplementation, exercise, recovery. But more along the lines for me is I had to reframe what I was and who I am, because I realized I can't do a lot of stuff I used to do, but I sure as shit can do a ton of stuff that I couldn't imagine that I ever would have did again. And one word that I hear a lot of these, you know, massive podcast people out there talk about is gratitude. And when I was going through it in that dark space, I honestly would sit there and have like those horrible alligator tears come down, like one, because I couldn't think of one thing I was grateful for. I couldn't even look at that bind, like look in the mirror and be like, my kids, anything. Cause I was like, I just went there, and you were just thinking about it because you went pretty quick for that surgery. I went 91 days sleepless. 91. I remember to this day. I remember, and I believe one of my friends gave me a CBD gummy or something, and it knocked me out during New Year's Eve. And I was like, whoo.
You'll do whatever it takes. You'll do whatever it takes.
Wait, when you try traditional medicine and you're me and you treat with as many doctors and work with as many physicians you do, I had access to everything. Nothing worked. You know, I would chuckle because I would tell people, I'm like, this, that, whatever it was supposed to be the drug, say it was Ambien or something, took it at 8 o'clock, try to get a good night's sleep. And everybody's like, oh, I sleep 10 hours on that. Like clockwork, at 10:01, I would wake up like this, wide awake. And I'm like, oh, good Lord, you know?
And I don't know about you, but I'm a terrible human being when I don't sleep. Regardless of the pain I'm in, I'm just not a good person.
Without a doubt. Like I'm so methodical in that. And that's like, it's probably the whole thing with Tough Love, this podcast is about rituals, routines. I don't come out of that. You know, there's a bunch of guys that I love that are coaches in different levels. Like, you know, Todd Durkin's a sports performance guy. He was Nike sponsor. He's got a great story. He's been through a ton of injuries. He's, I think he calls it like a 3-2-1 or 1-2-3, like basically like 7, 8, 9, 10 or 8, 9, 10. He starts preparing for end of day mindset. So he doesn't go right to 10 o'clock and just drop and take whatever negativity, whatever he's taken to bed. And I think the way I see that, I always tell people, I'm like, look, you can't be so obsessive compulsive. It's not going to be realistic. You do that all the time.
Right.
But if you could give yourself the grace of trying that 4 or 5 days a week, especially in your work week, you're going to be better for the people around you. You're going to be better for yourself. You're going to be better for your patients, your coworkers, your kids, whatever. And that was probably the biggest thing that I came out of that started this podcast was you need to make time for you. Because, you know, there were a few things that I was hanging on when I was really banged up. Was I got so desperate at a certain point that you would have thought that Tony Robbins was like my spiritual motivator, because I needed something to be so simple, but it was the truth. It was like, he would say, when you get on the plane, the first thing the flight attendants go when they go off to the safety regulations is, before you go to help anyone first, put on your oxygen mask. Right. And it's the truth, because then it's sitting there listening. The people I would listen to, it's hysterical. It's like going from, you know, rap music, Eric Thomas, to country music, Tony Robbins. I was laughing. I go, and then you hear Eric Thomas and you appreciate it, saying, you don't realize how important it is. You want it as bad as you want to breathe. But if you can't breathe, you're not going to do too much.
Absolutely.
Right? And, you know, for where I'm at now, coming onto the other side of it, it's like, I love having the opportunity to go into people when I'm talking to them, like, hey, it's all about hope. And if anybody, you know, if I experience what I went through, you know, I think that becomes a message. And I don't care whether it's AA or anything, that's the dark spot. And when you can show that vulnerability, that you were there, and I can't wait. Like I said, we're going to go through my phone and pull out a ton of old pictures during that time, because, and it was right after we were together during COVID. I would have 20 layers on, like a homeless person, because I was trying to look heavier, because I was so, you know, wasting away. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and I was just grinding. I literally felt like a POW in my own head and on my own body.
Right.
And I have to tell you, it's like, and we talked about it, like, you know, I remember when you first had the surgery, you couldn't swallow, couldn't eat, you were miserable.
It's brutal.
You know, and I always say, I'm like, you know what? Frame that. So when little things happen that aren't that bad, remember what bad was.
100%. I will never forget. I told people I wouldn't wish this pain on anybody. And I lost movement in my right arm for a period of time because, you know, the rupture was so bad in my spine. You know, I was laying on the nerve. I mean, that I would wish on nobody. And it gives you the ability to look back and be grateful. You mentioned a couple things. Number one, I think the biggest takeaway from all of that, for me, something that's been really big, is that we get overwhelmed. We get so overwhelmed because there's so many people that are on this like performance journey that want to get better, but they can do it for 3 days. They can do it for 3 weeks if they're lucky. And then it fades. And it's because we set we want to set big goals, but we can't. We're still human beings.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes you only got to do one thing. If you do one thing consistently, it can lead to greatness. And so, I just posted something about journaling because it's something that, talk about taking care of yourself. It's religious for me. I know I'm going to grow and be a better person when I can put my thoughts on paper, period. Not on my phone. It's got to be on paper with a pen and get it out. But so many people don't even start it because they're overwhelmed by a blank page.
Yes.
Like there's nothing more intimidating than like a blank page. So it's like, hey, it doesn't have to be rocket science. It's your personal journey. Write down one thing a day you're grateful for. Like literally just open it up, grateful for. And then eventually that page starts to fill up and it gets much easier to start writing. So, take one step. And when you do that one step, you can build upon it. But we get so overwhelmed at times and then we get stuck. I think that's when we really get stuck.
What I love, it's funny. You were doing the journaling thing for a long time. You were preaching that to the kids, and it's something you were doing when you were, teaching, ADing. You had many hats you wore at CBA. And I laughed. I started the journaling process when I hit rock bottom. And I did like a 30-day reset. And it's funny when you don't realize, what you've done and you appreciate the amount of people you've helped or treated, whatnot, until I started reaching out and basically sending my resume to doctors, say, hey, you know what? I need help. And, these doctors were from all over the world. And, this one, Dr. Howard, was actually remarkably kind. He reached out, and I tell you, this guy is world-renowned, works at a prestigious academic university and kind of in the mind-body space. And once I had the neurosurgeon say, hey, you don't need surgery, but this is going to be a grind. You got to avoid certain triggers, but you're going to be 50. Like you don't need to go out there and run, 50 suicides and then expect not to have some aches and pains. But when I started journaling, it was such a challenge for me not to go back to the same dark thoughts over and over again that I had to go like with the KISS principle where I'm like, all right, I would sit there, put the Tony Robbins piece on, listen to it, get uplifted, think about that, do 10 minutes of something like where I was like, okay, here we go.
Right.
Then when it would project to paper or project to my iPad, which would go into a key lock, because a little bit different, the mind body space, they like you to dump it after.
Right.
So whether it's this huge thing you're grateful for or a dark thought or anything, disperse it.
Get it out,
and then get rid of it, dump it and get it out of you. And when I started doing that, I realized now 3-4 years later, when I do my notes, I start my top with like, whether it's Monday Magic, right? And every day it's got a plan. I write a forward in that every time.
Right.
And that's my journal for the day.
Perfect.
And, and whether I look for a quote on something spiritual,
perfect,
something with a bird of prey, or this or that. And I love it because obviously out in nature, I hunt all the time. I always like to see different things, whether it's, a wolf, I haven't seen them yet in the wild, but like whether it's an elk or a deer or something. And when I'm noting that, it puts me in a good headset. And I tell my team, and it's amazing. I don't care whether you're talking about Sean Casey and, baseball or whatever. When your headset is right, you execute at a ridiculously high level.
It's insane.
And when you set that tone, and I try to, like I said, every day I'm 4:00 by 4:30, I'm posting 4:45, or I try to stay off. I try to give myself a solid half hour to 45 minutes before I get into it. But I will say when I do that, it is amazing that I can tell these guys to the minute, we're going to have an amazing day. And you brought it up earlier, if my sleep is off and I can't motivate to grind past the fatigue, and then all of a sudden I rush those little steps.
Right.
Now all of a sudden it becomes a negative disruption. I love being a disruptor. I love being a person that's going to disrupt what is seen as normal. But when you do that with your rituals, routines, and I don't care, it's how you warm up. I mean, you were a professional baseball player.
100%.
If I change your warm up because you're at a away game on purpose, I'm probably going to affect your outcome. Right. And
so many guys they get obsessed with their rituals and their routines, but that also leads to performance. We know it. If you look at sports psychology, a lot of things that sports psychologists are doing are trying to help set up positive rituals and routines for athletes.
100%.
Take out the thinking. One of the things that I remember, Barack Obama was talking about limiting decisions. I mean, we're talking about the president of the United States. He has to make 1 billion decisions. And he's like, I have one color suit. That's it. Like I cannot waste any mental energy on
I'm going to stress out
what I'm going to wear
blue,
today.
Yeah. Wearing black. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah. And whatever you think about him politically, that is that is such an important takeaway for all of us, which is what are some of the decisions that we're wasting our mental energy on that are disrupting in a bad way our day, and how can we repurpose that energy?
Love it. One thing. So you went back on social media, and I saw it. I saw the V. Got excited. Right?
Oh, baby.
And what's the plan? On the fact I'm going to make you a regular on our podcast.
Yeah,
What's the plan?
What's the plan for me personally?
Spiritual? Yeah. Is that your own personal journey? Is something you'd like to do to give back? Or
no. I mean, going back to purpose, I think this all started. We were watching, me and my wife. We just had our third child 2 months ago. Thank you. And we were like, she was a week late, and my wife is an incredible pregnant woman. Like, she's an incredible woman all the time, but when she's pregnant, like, other women hate her. That's how beautiful she looks, amazing she's doing, right? So she's just that kind of, she just does
energy.
It. And she she loves being pregnant, but she was a week late. And so that changes the game. So I remember us sitting there waiting, just waiting, right? And we were watching the documentary on the Kelsey brothers. I can't remember the name of it, but it was awesome. It was mostly about Jason Kelsey from the Eagles, the center from the Eagles.
Who saved his brother's career.
Yeah, crazy, right? And that's a great story. But he was struggling at the end of that episode. He was sitting there, and you talked about making peace or having a chance to say goodbye earlier to your training into basketball. He was struggling with the decision to retire or not retire.
100%, yeah.
And he was in serious anguish. And my wife looked at me, and she goes, "You can help this guy." And I was like, she believes in me. And she's like, you want to coach, you love coaching, you love making impact on other people. Like, this is a guy who could like give you a call, and you can get him through it, because you've been through it athletically, and you've been through it in your career, in your business career. And I'm like, you know what? There are a lot of people out there that may not know where to go. And if you help one other person, it's worth it. And so that's why I'm back on. I just want to make as big an impact as possible. I've thought a lot about like my purpose here. And my purpose is if I can help one person, then I've done my job. Beyond my family. I mean, my family is my biggest priority, but then what other impact can I make? So I'm back on social media, and I'm coaching. I'm doing one-on-one coaching. So it's been a great journey. It's been great to accept that, like, people coming back online and saying, "Hey, we've missed you." I'm not looking for 1 million followers at all. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to just have my community on there, be the best I can every day for them, and hopefully change some lives. And so, don't want followers. I want people who are leaders in their families, people who are leaders in their community, and people who realize, like you and I have, you're not going to do it alone. Like, you need a coach. You need somebody, a mentor, somebody that you can call in those times.
It's funny you say that. I tell people all the time, and I've definitely had some pivotal points in my life, and you have to have people you can lean into. Because much like yourself, when you're the guy that's up front all the time, when you fall forward.
Yeah. Right.
And if you don't put your hand out and ask for help, it's a lonely place.
Right.
And I remember when he, I think they just won the Super Bowl. Right?
Yeah.
Or they either won
or
they
lost.
They lost to his brother, right? Yeah. Whereas he lost to his brother, and he's like, "Hey, I'm coming back." And, I think I've seen both sides. I've seen people walk away and make, some of the best decisions of their life. I've seen people stay and make some of their worst. I think the biggest thing that you realize is you have to make your own pet way.
Right.
And whatever that decision is, you got to be whole with it. So, but brother, listen, today was absolutely fire.
It was awesome.
I have to tell you that we talked about doing a podcast together.
Oh, years ago.
Right before COVID. And here we are. And I have to tell you, I don't know what episode this is, but the significance today meant a lot for me. To be back to health, both of us back to health.
Yes.
3 babies in. I have a son at IMG. Hopefully he's back there thriving soon, and my daughter's doing well. We have a ridiculously thankful lives, and grateful. We should be grateful for every moment.
100%, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's been great reconnecting, man.
Well, listen, guys, we're going to share Vito's contact information and put it on the platform so you guys can get a follow him, see what he has out there. He really resonates in a spiritual way. He's sharp. His athletic stories and his interaction with people is just really special and unique, and worth a read. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today on Tough Love. We'll see you guys again soon. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, man.